Hello and welcome to another Lord Slav video with today's guest, Joey Morgan,
Hey.
otherwise known as Security Kitchen Productions. His links in the description, all sorts of fun stuff on there, including a novel adaptations of the Virgin New Adventures Doctor Who novels from the 90s, and full of, edgy 90s wilderness years stuff. And they're really cool, and
Yeah.
they're done really well. But for today's video, we're not going to be discussing edgy 90s novels made by Virgin for Virgins. We're going to be talking about Malcolm Hulke, the amazing Doctor Who writer who wrote a slew of stories, most famously during the Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks era. And I've brought Joey on because he, like me, is a very, very big fan of Mr. Malcolm Hulke. So, we're going to start with his first story, which is The Faceless Ones, penned by not only himself, but also David Ellis. So, what do we think of The Faceless Ones? Does it really bear much of the kind of Malcolm Hulke style, given that it is very different from his other stories, and obviously is co-written with somebody else?
Yeah. Because this is also David Ellis's only TV story, right? Or did he
Yes.
help on something else too?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
For that reason, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly is Hulk stuff, what exactly is David Ellis's stuff. But when it comes to Hulk stuff, a lot of his stories, I'm sure as we'll talk about later, is full of a lot of political allegory. And that very much is still here. It doesn't feel like a lot of his other stories, but that's still sort of there with at least the idea behind the chameleons.
So, can you expand on that a bit? What kind of political allegory do you think it's trying to make?
For me, at least, I think. I'm not exactly sure how relevant it would have been at the time, but it strikes me as a sort of a refugee allegory.
Really?
I think. No, maybe not refugee, but if nothing else, a sort of emigration, political allegory where we get this fear of accepting others into a society, and you get it's not as deep as some of his other political allegories, but you feel it there too because it's because at the end of the day, the chameleons aren't exactly full on villains. They aren't actively trying to murder the entire human race. They're trying to integrate themselves into the human race as well, and use the Earth as their new home.
Interesting. I'd never thought
If
of it
that
like
makes
that before.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how much I even agree that this is something intentional, but it's certainly an interesting thought to add to the story. I don't think anybody's going to hurt that thought. So that's certainly something very interesting to talk about the story. Yeah, but I just don't know if I quite agree.
That's fair. That's fair. Like I said, it's not the strongest allegory there, but I do think it is there, even if it's not intentional.
Well, I just feel that if this was the case, it would be kind of making out the immigrants to be the bad guys, replacing the people in the society. It's literally, it'd almost be like a kind of allegory for, alt-right people, with it being like the great replacement or whatever.
See, but then he also does sort of the same thing with the Scilurians, maybe a bit more nuanced. And it's... Yeah, I guess the chameleons are pretty one-sided. Yeah, you're right about that, but...
I just think that Malcolm Hulke, because he is much more responsible with how he handles politics in his other stories, to have made this about immigration, because I just could only see it as being a negative view of immigration if that was an intentional allegory, which I just don't think would really have been done by Malcolm Hulke.
But then also that we sort of come back to the discussion of what exactly is his stuff, what exactly is David Ellis's influence on the story.
Well, I tell you what,
it really is hard to tell.
Well, what I kind of notice is with most Malcolm Hulke stories, there's quite a feeling of slow build-up mystery and all of that, and I think that's very present here. The tension and mystery surrounding the first four parts is absolutely brilliant and reminiscent of some of his later work, which obviously does have this more kind of conspiratorial bent with things like Invasion of the Dinosaurs or Colony in Space or the Scilurians. There's a conspiracy going on, and he uses that to make the first part of the story so gripping to the viewer. And I feel that very much that part of the story is very reminiscent of his writing, and it feels like that his style is kind of shown there.
Yeah, definitely. I know you're not a big fan of it, but I do also like parts 5 and 6. I know you're not a fan of it yourself, but I don't know. It doesn't feel Malcolm Hulk, but it does feel like still for me at least, a satisfying conclusion to the story.
It's not satisfying. I don't think it's satisfying because it just kind of ends. Like, or the mystery's resolved basically at the beginning of part five, and then after that, it's just kind of meandering about for 2 episodes with some pretty weak kind of negotiation scenes and not really given a proper explanation about everything. It's just like, oh, just some vague accident lost our identities. It's like, well, what does that even mean? Could we not have, rather than spending all this time kind of walking around this spaceship, maybe we could have actually spent some time talking about that, explaining what that means.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I think I'm really drawn in by the doc, a lot of Troughton's performance in it, and the doctor's conversations with the chameleon leader. Is it the leader in that case in those last couple scenes?
Yeah, the one who takes over Bernard Kay's character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really drawn in by that. I think it's just really gripping dialogue, if nothing else, for me at least.
I wasn't that sold on it, but fair enough. If you got something out of those last 2 episodes, as they do kind of kill the story a bit for me. So yeah, certainly
Fair enough.
certainly a positive start for Malcolm Hulke on the show, and he was asked to come back in season 7 for Doctor Who and the Silurians. Although he was brought back because he was a close friend of Terrance Dicks, rather than because of his previous record. I should clear
I
that
mean,
out.
you're also forgetting War Games.
Oh
right?
my god, I am. I'm forgetting the war. How did I forget the war games?
You forgot the fucking War Games.
Oh, I love the war games as well. No, this isn't good. Yeah. So he then later in the second Doctor's era co-wrote the war games with Terrance Dicks, which for some reason in my head, just for that moment, I thought was only done by Terrance Dicks. Okay, yeah. So the war games. Say something, Joey, before I ruin the whole video.
No, I love the War Games. I mean, obviously, it's brilliant. Another one where I think most of it is Terrance Dicks. I think a lot of it a lot of like Hulk's influence may have been just carrying out the story because it feels very Terrance Dicks. This grand idea, very very fun, very spirit of adventure, but also very dramatic and super tense. I really really love it. Some of the greatest Doctor and companion moments throughout. I love Jamie and Zoe throughout it. They have some really great moments for themselves, and the villains. I mean, I fucking love the villains. The War Chief. And then Philip Maddox, Warlord, who I adore. Just a ton of great performances. Just a really tight script, in my opinion. And wasn't the script churned out in like 2 weeks?
Yeah,
something like that,
it's
or maybe
2 weeks. Necessity is the mother of invention.
For real, it is, yeah. And it's just like I can't imagine what that writing process was like. They just got in a room and must have hammered it out. Like
Lots of coffee and cigarettes, I imagine.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, it's crazy. And you wouldn't be able to tell on the finished product because it is just such a tight script and so very focused, and especially focused for a 10-part story.
Yeah, no, I mostly agree with what you said there, but there's one thing I'm going to disagree with you on, is that I do think that there is a lot of Hulkian influence here. So, for the kind of the first thing, it has that part of his style, which is, it's all about a conspiratorial mystery. And obviously it starts off just appearing like normal World War One, they're back in the past. Even when the General pulls out his glasses, it's just like, well, they could still just be in World War One, but there's some kind of weird alien influencing events, like I don't know, the meddling monk or something. But then obviously it turns out that they're not even fighting in France, blah blah blah. And I feel that's very Hulkian. Another thing I feel is quite Hulkian is you said there was a political metaphor in the first one which I disagreed with, whereas I do think there is one here. This is we've got to remember that Malcolm Hulke was a card-carrying member of the British Communist Party for a while, and I do actually see a bit of that here, where it's one kind of talking point is like, workers of the world unite, in the writings of Marx. And that's kind of talking about don't be held back by your national ties because, you don't have much in common with the people higher up in your nation. You don't have anything in common with the aristocracy or the wealthy capitalists. Whereas whereas you have a lot in common with a worker, even if they're in a completely different country. A British worker has more in common with a Czech worker than he does with the Prime Minister, for instance. And I feel that kind of metaphor is here, where it's like this kind of getting all of the soldiers from different nations to team up against this ruling elite who are basically just treating their lives as a game, that they're just toys on the board. And we have that very dark scene in episode 2 or 3 where you've got Von Wyk and General Melchett. No, General Melchett? That's Blackadder. General Smythe.
Okay, General... that makes it I would love to see Stephen Fry.
General Smythe kind of just saying, "Oh well, this will be an excellent test of your men's morale," and I feel that is very clearly an intentional message about that. Not particularly, it's not got a particularly strong message or anything. It's just kind of inspired off that kind of political theory leaning, but however you describe it.
That is interesting. I guess I'd never considered that take on it before. That's really interesting, especially because I guess I had really attributed a lot of the war games to Dix, because if you read some of his novels after during the Wilderness years, not just Time of Exodus, but also the novel Players, Endgame, there's a lot of stuff that like really shows like how much influence just World War One and various wars throughout Earth's history had on his work. But I hadn't taken that political allegory into account, and that's really interesting. I'd never thought of that before.
I could be reading too much into it, but I don't know. Considering that we actively know what his politics were, well, at least to a certain extent, I think that it's pretty likely based on what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree, definitely.
Yeah, so I think we both agree that we see a lot more of what Hulk's about in this story as a writer.
Yeah, definitely, especially because I hadn't considered that before. Yeah, I definitely see that now.
Yeah, so now we're going to go over to his first solo venture when he was invited back to write for Season 7, when Terrance Dicks, of course, had become the script editor. Well, I mean, he was the script editor by the end of Season 6, but, properly in part of the furniture of the show by this time. So what do we think of the Scilurians and how it kind of shows the Hulk's kind of style really coming into full fruition?
I mean, first off, I think if for anyone who doesn't know, I don't know why anyone wouldn't know at this point, this is my favorite TV Doctor Who story. I love Doctor Who and the Scilurians. And it's just got Malcolm Hulke written all over it, doesn't it? Now, we already talked about the slow build-up before, his political allegories, and I think for a 7-part story, it perfectly uses its time, like better than any other 7-part, in my opinion. It perfectly uses up the exact amount of time that it's given, and uses up all its reveals at just the right time. Especially when we focus on that slow build-up. For a story called Doctor Who and the Scilurians, you don't actually see a Silurian in full costume until the end of episode 3. It's all about the slow build-up to that point. What is going on here at this station? What's causing the power outages? What is this creature going through the caves and killing people out on their farms? It's this super intriguing mystery, and one of the Doctor is all over, especially when he starts interacting with the Silurians. And we see one of the few times in Classic Who that the aliens that the Doctor is up against in this aren't all bad, and we see that some of them do strongly disagree with the others. We see the main one that the main Silurian the Doctor interacts with throughout is all for listening to the Doctor and saying, okay, maybe he's right. Maybe we should try coexisting with the humans, as the Doctor suggests. But we see that friction within the Silurian society, and this slow buildup of seeing how others might disagree and seeing exactly where they come from too. No one in this story, I think, is painted as an out and out villain. I think everyone, you see their motives, you see exactly where they're coming from, you see where their fears, their hopes all come from, and how it could easily snowball and spiral out of control. I love Major Baker. Major Baker's character, who would be that younger Silurian that rebels against the older Silurian, who would be the human equivalent of that. You see that both sides are pretty much the exact same, and they're saying the exact same things on both sides. Some of them want to listen, some of them want to fight. Some of them think the Earth belongs to them. The others think that they should live together. I think it's a really, really interesting, great mystery. It's a mystery, but you wouldn't. I don't think you'd necessarily attribute that word to it because it doesn't. It's not out and out mysterious, but that build up there, you're intrigued. You want to see more. And I know there are people that really, really don't like this story, but I think for me at least,
it's madness.
There are. Oh my god, yeah. I've had far too many Twitter interactions with people that really don't like the Silurians and think it's padded to all hell, and think that I heard someone say that you could cut like 4 episodes from it. I'm like, fucking how? Yeah. I've actually seen people say that. It's fucking
You would
ridiculous.
significantly damage this story by doing such a thing. And it is just a brilliant piece of speculative science fiction. I'd say it's something in that genre, because it is posing the question, could we as humans coexist with another species if they happen to have already been living here? And I think it deals with that question with the kind of sincerity and nuance that you need with having kind of characters representing the different sides of the kind of debate that would spark up both between the humans and this potential new race. And I feel that it's very Malcolm Hulke, obviously in the sense that we get that kind of slow build up, a lot of mystery. Like, it's kept kind of a mystery as to what exactly is going on for quite a while. And, until like about episode 4. And then that's when we start to get into the whole kind of, well, can we coexist with the Silurians? And I feel that kind of works quite well in kind of, because with a 7-parter it's so long, you do need to kind of have different sections of the story doing different things to keep viewers' interest. I feel it does that absolutely perfectly. And certainly an important part of it is... Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. An important part of it is the fact that Malcolm Hulke is kind of giving this alien race lots of nuance. They have different personalities and disagreements, which is really the first time we see this in Doctor Who, except for the Sensorites, at least from what I can think of, in terms of like an alien race that don't look like humans being treated like this. And this is something that Terrance Dicks does in the future with stuff like Frontier in Space, where aliens aren't treated as kind of gestalt entities. I mean, I suppose in this case, Silurians technically aren't aliens, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think by far, and despite all the stuff we mentioned we love about it so far, I think my favorite part about the entire story is something we haven't even talked about yet, and that is the Silurian plague. Building on that fear, what would happen, and especially living right now. We've had a couple conversations about Doctor Who and the Silurians on various videos since the start of the pandemic, but it's very real now, isn't it? We see that. We watch those scenes in Doctor Who and the Silurians, and I don't know. I every time I've watched it since, I've sort of gritted my teeth and been like, "Wow, that's fucking real, isn't it?" It really, really hits, and it's this really awful, horrible, but brutally real look at what that would be like, what that is like now that we know. I love what's the name of Jeffrey Palmer's character? Is it Masters? I think.
Yes.
I want to say it's Masters, and I love his character. That like he's not patient zero, but he's the first guy to like go out there and unknowingly spread it among the public, and then we still follow him as the Silurian plague is still ravaging the streets, and we still follow his character as he slowly dies and gets like these spots all over his skin, and I love the last shot of him, like as he dies, as we see him like fall up against this railing and just totally drop. It's so brilliantly written and so well crafted that you don't even know the character for that long, but you still feel that and you still see that. You still see it play out, and it hits really hard, I think.
Yeah, and I think we've really uncovered the truth that in the caves of Wuhan, the Silurians released the coronavirus. Anyway, right, so we're going to move on to the next story, which is Colony in Space, a sadly much maligned Pertwee story, often considered one of the weakest of his era, which is something that I personally strongly disagree with. But what do you think, Joey?
This is weird. It's weird for me. I do think it is one of the weakest of his era, but I don't think it's a bad story in the slightest. Like I would rank it pretty low in a Pertwee ranking, but I love every Pertwee story. So it's pretty hard for me to say that like, oh yeah, this would be pretty low ranked. No, it's still like an 8 out of 10 for me. Yeah, Colony in Space is brilliant. I really really like it. It's a very I think it's a very different Malcolm Hulke story though, isn't it? It's first off, I guess Hulk has never done something like this spacefaring and really trying to set up a totally different world from our own. Because at least like even in the war games, like it wasn't set
Yeah.
on Earth, but it was still very like Earth based. But this is Hulk's first venture into a totally alien world, and he takes the time and says, okay, it's an alien world. We could just do the typical Doctor Who thing and give us like a weird landscape, and that's the whole set, and we have some aliens and weird costumes here, and that's still all there. But Hulk looks at it and says, okay, no, it's a world. It's just like ours. Or maybe not just like ours, but it's still a world. It still has its own culture, its own society, its own people. Let's take the time to explore that, and that's what I really love about Colony in Space. What I think it really excels at is the world that he sets up, and the different factions that you see throughout this. I love IMC as a creation. I love seeing that like what the government of this world and other worlds, I guess, at the time would be like, and I think it's just really well executed. The idea of the adjudicators and a really honestly great way to incorporate the Master into the story. I love that. What's the name of the aliens? The green guys. I can't think of the name.
Xurians. Is it? Xurians?
Yeah. I think so. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. One of them, and it's yeah, I love them too. It's a very very rich world, and really makes Colony in Space not what seems very different from most of Hulk's work. It really makes it all the same because he takes that same care and appreciation for a world that isn't ours and makes it a world that we can still believe in, and makes it a world like ours in that respect.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said there, especially with at the point of Malcolm Hulke's being given a chance to be unleashed from Earth and really create his own stuff. Because obviously we talked about how a lot of his scripts are very politically charged, and this being unmoored from the present day means that he has a chance to really play with politics that don't actually exist, create his own world of a different politics, but still something that kind of reflects what we do see in real life. And I think that's really good to see here. Like we get an understanding of what the world is like back home, even though we don't see it. That kind of shows us why it's why these people have chosen to come all the way out here and live quite humble existence, because the Earth is so crowded. And we learn about why these kind of mining companies are coming all the way out here, how they're kind of screwing people over, and it does add a lot interesting to the story. That's kind of how it mostly fills up its time in terms of really getting this politically charged stuff across. Kind of again with a more of a conspiratorial element. There's not much of a mystery element this time, but there certainly is a lot of kind of conspiracy and fighting for rights, really, which obviously very Hulkian in that sense.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. It's just super underappreciated, I think.
Yeah, I think some people just don't. Some people just don't like it because the on-location filming looks horrible, which it does. But the actual content of the story is great.
Most of the story looks most of the story looks horrible. Like location filming is bad. The costumes aren't great. It's not a great production of a story, but the script is so damn good.
Would you say it is one of the least visually appealing episodes of Doctor Who?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, it looks awful. It looks fucking horrible.
And it's so sad because it does kind of unfortunately get in the way of what is a really good story. I mean, I can think about like other scripts like with the Sunmakers where it's kind of ruined by its terrible production, despite having a pretty strong script in actual fact. Yeah. Bit of a shame, but oh well. We love you, Colony in Space. We do realise that you are.
We really do.
Quality content. Now let's move on to the Sea Devils, where I have a feeling this might be our first serious disagreement. So, do you want to talk about the Sea Devils first, Joe?
Okay, first disagreement. I love the Sea Devils. I really, really do. It's I first off I would go against the mold and say I see this weird criticism all the time that the Sea Devils is just the Silurians but with the Master. I would argue there's really not much similar at all, other than there's Third Doctor, there's Earth reptiles. That's about it. It's so I think it's a wildly different setting.
Well,
First off,
do you want me to explain why
because,
people like me have that opinion? So I mean,
sure.
so let's kind of think about this. Obviously, you have like the Master; it's in a different location, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, the core of a story is the kind of ideas it's trying to express, the themes it has, things like that. I'm not muffemesing you here, I promise. And essentially, it's got exactly the same scenario as the Silurians, where you have a race who've been here for millions of years, didn't wake up because their alarm clock broke, and then they realise, oh, well, the world's populated by other people now. Do we try to make peace, or do we not? And then the humans attack them and kill them all, and then that's the end of the story. After the Sea Devils already do their own attack. And so, yeah, it is pretty functionally
I think
the same story, just with slightly different bells and whistles. It's a remix of the Silurians, I suppose would be the best way to put it.
I mean, if you look at it on a very broad, with a very broad brush, there, I think you can say that. But honestly, I think there's a lot there that isn't in the Silurians, and also a lot in the Silurians that isn't here in the Sea Devils. First off, the Sea Devils just aren't as intelligent as the Silurians, so we don't have
or
that
as
same
interesting.
Sort of infighting. Fucking hell.
No, they aren't. I just don't think the Sea Devils are as interesting because you don't really get to see.
I agree. I think the Silurians are definitely better as a creation, but I'm saying I really don't think these two stories are as similar as people say they are.
No, I really think they are because, as I said, you kind of say that my opinion was painting with too broad a brush, but I was saying that those kind of broad strokes, they are what make a story. And I don't feel this does enough different to really separate itself from that.
We just talked about four. Okay, but Dylan, I'm just saying, we just talked about 4 stories in a row where we were like, oh yeah, these Hulk stories are made up by the nuances and the little details within them and how great the world building is. And you're like, okay, here's a broad brush of what the Silurians is, and the Sea Devils is exactly the same. But
it doesn't do anything functionally different. The way the idea is being explored is exactly the same, except not quite as good as in the Silurians. So I just don't see the point in watching a story that, I'm going to say it, kind of drags quite a lot throughout, just to rehash the same ideas. And look, I wouldn't have this problem if the Sea Devils decided to go somewhere different with it. Like, say, for example, they did manage to get some kind of peaceful accord or something else. It branched off in some way from the original idea. But no, it does pretty much exactly the same tale, just with far less interesting nuance. It doesn't feel as politically charged. So to me, it just feels like a dumbed-down version of the Silurians. That's all I've got to say, really.
See, okay, but is there a Brigadier equivalent in the in the Sea Devils? Because I don't think there is. I don't think there's any character that even remotely represents what the Brigadier does for the story of the Silurians. Because the Brigadier is one of those big aspects of the Silurians that really decides where the story is going. And I don't think there's that equivalent in the Sea Devils.
But the plot goes in exactly the same direction anyway.
It ends the same. Sure, they get wiped out. That's about it, though.
Well, it's literally the same concept. Species wakes up, finds their planet populated by humans. Won't they make peace? No, they won't. They get destroyed.
Because then figure you have the Master there. The Master is there playing devil's advocate for the Sea Devils to continue to fight and try and not make peace with the Doctor. That aspect isn't there in the Silurians. That's an aspect that the Master adds to the story.
It doesn't add to the story. It doesn't change the concept in any way. And I think that you could have done that with the Master in a way which kind of change the way it played out to actually make it interesting, but they don't. It doesn't go anywhere.
Here's the thing, though. I think if the Master wasn't there, the story would have ended totally different.
Yeah, but it plays out almost identically to how it does in the Silurians. If you're going to justify going back to this idea, you have to do something different with it.
And I think he does.
He doesn't. It plays out exactly the same in exactly the same way, just with different characters.
Entirely different setting, different characters.
But it's the same.
Different team dynamic. Different team dynamic entirely as well. Joe Grant isn't Liz Shaw. She's not a fucking scientist who can help the Doctor make a vaccine. You know?
Yeah, but to me that's irrelevant. I'm talking about how if you're going to retread on an idea that's already been done brilliantly, you need to actually do something different. Otherwise, it just feels like a waste of time, which this does to me and a lot of other people.
I don't think it feels like a waste of time though, because there are all these different moving pieces within the story. Yeah, the same basic idea is there, but every other aspect about the story is totally different characters. Again, the only
But it doesn't
similarity,
change
in my opinion,
anything. It doesn't change anything. So what's the point?
it doesn't change that one aspect about what the Earth reptiles do for the story. That's about it though. Everything else is totally different.
But it doesn't change anything. So what was the point in coming back to it?
Because it's a damn good idea.
Yeah, it is a damn good idea. So they should expand upon it rather than just do the same thing again.
And again, that's where I think we already agree that we differ, because I think they did expand on it, and you don't think they did.
No, they did the opposit. Expanded. It was made dumber. It was made less interesting.
We both explained why we think what we do. Is there any point in continuing this? Unless you can bring another point that all right, thank you.
Right, everybody unsubscribe from Joey's channel. This is unacceptable level of disagreement. Like you must cuck yourself when you come on my channel. Right, so next story is The Frontier in Space. So how about we get into more positive territory with each other, Joey, and begin.
We'll talk Frontier in Space. It's space opera. It's space politics, and it's super interesting.
It's so good.
I remember. Yes, it is. I watched this story with my one friend not that long ago, and he said it's like Doctor Who does Star Wars. Like, it feels like it could be a Star Wars film. Honestly, it's super interesting. Actually, should we get the one, I guess, sort of negative out of the way first? All the capture and escape.
I love all of the capture and escape. I think it actually is done really well, because the capture and escape, that through that vector they travel to all of these different places, obviously not by choice, and we go across the galaxy like this. And I feel that I don't know. I just really like how that works, because it means we do get this epic sense of galactic scale, which not many Doctor Who episodes really achieve, which is kind of surprising given...
That is true. One thing I do really like about the capture and escape stuff in there, though, is every time they are captured and something new happens, or we meet a new character, we meet a new race or something, we're able to take that time and sit back in a cell, and the Joe can say, like, hey, who are these people? What is going on here? What are the politics like right now? And we can explain those things through super interesting dialogue and really expand on this world. But you're right. I think
capture and escape was a great plot device, and I will not hear otherwise.
Look, I think it's overused. I think it is used well, though, if that makes sense.
Look, I'll defend it my dying breath, just because I love this story. And as I said, it is part of that kind of grand scale which very few Doctor Who episodes achieve. It needs all 6 of those episodes, and it does so much with them.
I would argue, despite not being like considered one of the big event episodes, I think it's the episode, like one of the stories about the Doctor Who story that expands on the universe the greatest. Like, we see so much here, we learn so much about the universe. So much other Doctor Who media has taken this idea and been like, okay, this is a great alien race. I love the Draconians. Let's explore their politics. I love the Ogrons. How are they used throughout the universe? They're alien bounty hunters. I love that too. Even that Hulk takes the Ogrons, just this really dull idea from Day of the Daleks, and says, no. They can be used by anyone. They can be hired by anyone. These are mercenaries. And I love that idea, too. You have that leading up fantastically to the reveal of the Daleks at the end. It's just this huge epic of a story, and filled with beautiful world building. Such a shame it's followed up by Planet of the Daleks.
Yeah, I was about to actually say that. I feel the reason it isn't kind of seen in that high regard as a monumentally great piece of Doctor Who is because Planet of the Daleks was such a crap follow-up to, because this story was basically all building up to Planet of the Daleks, more or less, and what a bloody great story it was. And then you get Planet of the Daleks, which I do enjoy, but man, it feels like such a step down. Yeah. Like, in terms of just, like, scale... in how interesting it is. It's just like you go from right up here, like the tension's right up here with Frontier in Space, and all of a sudden Planet of Daleks is quite a meandering six-part story, which doesn't feel anywhere near on the scale of Frontier in Space. And if you're going to follow up a story like Frontier in Space, it needs to at least maintain that sense of scale.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's such a great ending too. You reveal the Daleks. The Master has been working with the Daleks this whole time. The Doctor and Joe escape from the Master. They get in the TARDIS. The Doctor is knocked out, and as a last ditch resort, he calls the Time Lords and says like they're the only guys that can help us in the end. And then we just never fucking follow up on that. It's horrible. I hate it so much. I think isn't it the theory that the Time Lords saw that transmission and they observed the events of Planet then, and that's what made them send the Doctor after the Daleks in Genesis? I think that's how it goes.
Well, no, he called them so that they could direct his TARDIS to where the Daleks were, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess that works. Never mind.
And to me, this story really feels like the full fruition of what was kind of starting in Colony in Space, in terms of really letting Malcolm Hulke get out there, make up his own political scenarios, but again, with a kind of real-world basis, obviously this being made during the Cold War. And I just love how much we get to see and learn. And again, we have a nuanced alien race with lots of different characters in it. Like, as much as I like how they're handled in the Scilurians, then most of them aren't really, particularly complex characters. They're pretty one-note. Whereas with the Draconians, there is actually some proper characters there that are fun to watch.
I do. I like you mentioned the Cold War. That's one thing I really love about Malcolm Hulke's space stories is they apply our real world politics and those political allegories that are that fill up his stories, and he applies them to these grand spacefaring ideas. It's just super interesting to watch.
No, Joey, you're wrong. Political allegories were only invented in 2018.
True. That's true. The moment the Doctor grew a vagina, that's when political allegory started to exist. That's it.
But yeah, so I think that Frontier in Space should be held in the highest regard. I really resent the fact that this episode's kind of looked down upon, or at least kind of seen as mediocre by the majority of fans. Whereas I think, in my opinion, I'd say this is up there among the best of Doctor Who. Like, it's not a love.
Last time I watched the story, I gave it a 10 out of 10, like, straight out. I was like, that's a perfect Doctor Who story. I fucking love that so much.
Yeah, me too, man. Just it is pure distilled Malcolm Hulke. Malcolm Hulke. I cannot speak today. Right, so there's Frontier in Space. Now we're going to move on to what was sadly his final story for the show. We didn't get any more after this, unfortunately. Oh, sorry, what's its name? Oh, Invasion of the Dinosaurs. I don't know how I forgot that for a second. Yes,
Dylan, it's Invasion.
No, Invasion. Not to be confused with The Invasion. Yeah, so Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Yeah. Another story that doesn't seem to enjoy the highest reputation in Doctor Who community, which is something I do strongly disagree with. But what do you think, Joey?
I love it. I really do love it. I think it's... Excuse me. I think it's... again, one of Hulke's really strong outings. I don't think there really is a bad Malcolm Hulke script.
No, there isn't.
Yes, it's true. Like, okay, actually, let's go back to that for a quick second. Would you at least say the Sea Devils is at least a half decent script?
Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. In isolation, it's like just a okay bit of TV,
Okay. Gotcha. Just wanted to cover that. Anyway, Invasion of the Dinosaurs. I really do love it. I think it's first. It starts off as a really fun story too. I love episode 1, just the way it opens. Again, back to this really slow build up we keep going on about. The Doctor and Sarah land back on Earth, and they start to see that something's not quite right. There's nobody on the streets. It's a really great mystery to start the story off with, and I really do love it. Also, such a fucking shame that we don't have a proper colorization of episode 1. I fucking hate it. But anyway, a great mystery in episode 1. Love that. Leading up to this great reveal at the end of episode 1 with dinosaurs, hence the reason part 1 was just called Invasion. We then start to catch ourselves up with the history of what's happened since they were gone. we were put under martial law, and this other group has come in and sort of taken over unit's operations, and we learn eventually that they're the ones behind these time travel experiments going on right now. It's really, really interesting. I love the Brigadier in this. The Brigadier is, I think, a really underrated aspect of this, because we see. I think actually you could probably watch all of Hulk's stories, obviously bar the Sea Devils, and Frontier in Space. Never mind, fuck me. And see like how the Doctor and Brigadier's relationship sort of builds. We see this really antagonistic relationship in Doctor Who and the Silurians, and at this point we see them as good friends, but still this sort of continually like punching each other in the arm, and it's really interesting to watch. But if we're talking about interesting unit characters, we have to talk about Mike Yates, who is easily the most interesting thing about Invasion of the Dinosaurs for me, because Hulk takes this character that we've loved for the most part since season 8, and really turns him into like a right bastard. But at the same time, you understand why he feels the way he does. His motives are well explained. You understand why he thinks that this is what humanity has to do, and why he thinks that, and why he has turned on UNIT. I think it's so interesting.
And the thing is, that was actually quite reflective of some attitudes by the most extreme environmentalists at the time, where it is just like, we have failed as a species, we must return to monkey, as it were. And I think that's it's part of why it's such great Hulk. I mean, obviously the Third Doctor is an era with a lot of kind of environmentalist messages, which are very good. But then Malcolm Hulke is kind of bringing in a bit of nuance, saying, well, yeah, environmentalism is really important, and he makes that clear in the story, but you can go too far with it.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, and also to do it with such a beloved character too, I think makes it all the more interesting, all the more gripping, because he's used a really well-established character to get this point across, and you totally see like where it's coming from, how it's built up, and just a really great piece of writing there. Yeah,
it has the mystery, it has the conspiracy, it has, you know, a politically charged message. The dinosaurs are a bit naff, but you know what? That's not really the interesting part of the episode. The best part of it is all the conspiracy
it's
stuff.
It's another colony in space thing. Like, yeah, it looks kind of shit. I mean, Invasion of the Dinosaurs as a whole looks better, but the dinosaurs themselves are like colony in space level shit. But it's still fun to watch, and you're sort of like, oh, they tried.
Yeah, it almost feels like with Colony in Space and with Invasion of Dinosaurs, they had monsters in just because it was expected to have monsters in, rather than because Malcolm Hulke thought they particularly added to the story that much.
Yeah, that's true. But they still work out in the story, I think. Just
absolutely.
Maybe don't quite fit as well. They probably should have. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one case where if they did like a remake of Invasion of the Dinosaurs, sorry, not a remake, but like, you know, special effects eyes on the, you know, Blu-ray stuff. I mean, I might actually switch it on, because usually I'm like, screw any CGI in Classic Who. I want to see shit effects. But this is one where I would be willing, like, okay, this would improve it.
That's why we watch them.
That's why I've just started watching Star Trek for the first time, as I've never really been able to get into it in the past, and I watched it on Netflix, and I'm really annoyed that the version they have on Netflix has like CGI in it, like, so like all of the planets and the Enterprise is all in CGI. It's just annoying. It's like, I want to see shit effects. Where are my shit effects?
Aren't they taking it off UK Netflix soon? You chose a pretty bad time to get into it.
I hope not. It's still on at the moment.
I think I saw recently that they were.
Oh well. But yeah, Invasion of the Dinosaurs, another excellent story. And so, kind of to conclude on the whole, just wow, what a litany of great stories, Malcolm Hulke. He seems to knock out the park every time. And even though I did have my kind of scathing criticism of the Sea Devils, it is in no way a bad story. It's still, you know, probably above average bit of Doctor Who. If we take all of Doctor Who in its entirety, it's probably higher than the middle point. So yeah, he just pretty much almost always hits out the park. He's an amazing writer. Do you want to sum up, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason that like he's my favorite TV Doctor Who writer. I mean, I have other favorites, but that's including expanded universe stuff into the mix. but Hulk is easily my favorite TV writer, and it's because he really does just nail it every single time. He takes real world issues and makes really great characters and worlds, and continually builds on everything that he's done. There's a reason that all of his stories, at least from a certain point in the Pertwee era, continue to build on ideas that he's already set up in previous stories, because he does just want to continue that world. We see that in the Silurians going into the Sea Devils, or Colony in Space going into Frontier in Space. You see those worlds continually built upon because he is just so interested and so dedicated in writing these characters and these worlds and making them insanely interesting to watch. And I think there's a reason it works every time, and why they're among some of the most popular Pertwee stories, at least like Silurian, Sea Devils. That's about it. Fuck.
I think that he has the best formula for consistently producing great stories. So all of his stories are 6 parts or more, and I think the kind of formula he's made up really lends itself to that, to make some of the most compelling Doctor Who stories. And the idea is you start off with a mystery, which then once you've graduated from mystery, it kind of goes to a conspiracy, which keeps the interest. It means that just after the mystery, the story doesn't taper off. It keeps going with that kind of level of tension, as well as kind of having politically charged elements so that the world they're in is very textured, it's very well built up. You're interested in resolving the conspiracy that's going on. And I feel that using that formula every time just worked so well. And at no point would I be sick of it at any point, because you can do so much with that. You can do so many different types of stories, which he does do. His stories, even though they have a kind of a same core formula, they're very varied in terms of what they're about. And I just think, what a writer. It's such a shame he didn't write more. I'd have loved to see him write for Tom Baker.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I think because he feels like such a core part of the Pertwee era, you can't help but feel like those criticisms that people level at Robot for feeling like the Pertwee era and in the Tom Baker era would probably be leveled at some Malcolm Hulke Tom Baker scripts. I feel like they would be.
True, but then I feel like something like Frontier in Space, you could rewrite and have Tom Baker in it and it'd work absolutely fine. It would feel like a Tom Baker story.
Yeah, that's true. He just can't really write like a Silurians or a Sea Devils again, or Invasion of the Dinosaurs for that. He can't really make that kind of thing work for Tom. But
yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying there. But overall, fantastic writer. I think we're both in strong agreement there. So I'd like to thank Joey for coming on, taking the time to speak to me today.
Of course, you got it.
And so we've done Malcolm Hulke. Don't know what we're going to do next, but probably another good one. I do more than enough negative videos on this channel, so we're keeping it positive. We're keeping it positive.
Do Chip and Jane Baker next.
Oh, but that means I'll have to rewatch Time and the Rani, and I really don't want to. The reason I haven't continued the reappraisal series is because of Time and the Rani, because that's the next one down, and I just really, really don't want to rewatch it. Oh, anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all back next time in another video.